if you're taking them to toilet or whatnot, then it's not in the way of anything that they would need to get to, and you're not soiling the gait belt. So that's how that works. Sometimes with someone who's a little bit more agitated, I will put this part in the back, so then they just have this flush part that they can mess with. So then they're not accidentally loosening it up while I'm helping them. That's how this one works. When I'm holding the gait belt to walk with someone, I always put my full hand up underneath like this. So then that way, if for some reason they start to fall or maybe they start to pull away from me, I can easily get my hand out. I'm not going to cause myself injury. So if you put your hand up like this, it's just easier to control. And also it's easier to control them. Another thing to keep in mind is when you're helping with someone with a gait belt, you don't want to be pulling up on it because that's going to hurt them. This is basically just a guide to help move them. So if they're not standing, try those cues again, give them a little time, and then sometimes just tapping them on the back or even just changing how they're holding their hands will kind of cue them to stand up. But this isn't going to really help them, and then it's just going to get all tangled, and then you're going to have to fix it. If you have someone who's really, really short, you can put it up right underneath their arms, like this. So that way, you're not having to bend really, really far over to help pick them up, but you have a little more control here. And sometimes patients like that a little bit more, especially if they're having like stomach problems or so that's this one. This one was a little bit easier because you just snap it and then you can just tighten it like one on this. This has little tabs on it that you can use to control, but just be cautious with these because you can easily get wrapped up and caught. Whereas if you're using your hands behind the back like this, it's a little easier to get them out. So just be cautious. It's basically personal preference. Okay? Any questions about any of that? Okay, next we're going to talk about bed mobility. So when you're helping someone in bed, whether it's like changing or toileting or whatnot, always make sure that you're lifting the bed high enough so that you're not having to bend over. So you're not causing more strain on your back, especially because if you're helping someone in bed, it's usually because they're very dependent, and so you're going to have to need to hoist them side to side. So it's just important to get it up to your level. And if you're helping someone who's in bed to stand up from bed, lower the bed so that their feet can be flat on the floor, so that they're not trying to stand, but they can't actually stand because they have their base of support's not on the ground. Always let them do as much as they can as possible because then it's going to have less you're going to have to use less energy to help them, and then they're just going to keep getting stronger. Kind of talked about this, but again, using verbal cues or touching to guide them always helps. So like I said, just giving like a little tap on the back to help them stand, or just like tapping to where they can put their hands makes a big difference. And a lot of times, touching is more effective because they don't have to think as much. They don't have to process as much. They have those other cues. Again, with beds, when you're rolling them side to side, make sure that you're not ever pulling on their arms and legs when you're rolling them side to side. You can use a bed sheet, or you could use, if you're using a Hoyer and you're trying to get the sling out, you could use the sling to help roll them, because that way you're not injuring them. You're not tearing their skin, you're not pulling on their arms so that they could have injury to their joints. You're being really cautious. So just pulling on those sheets, help them over, make a big difference. Okay, so a Hoyer lift. So now we're going to talk about this. So like the gait belts, there's two different kinds. So there's a manual lift, and then there's the electric lift. So it just kind of depends on what's around when you want to use it. You should always, always, always complete it with two people for several reasons. One, this is dangerous because you're lifting someone up in the air and having to move them while they're still swinging in the air. They could fall out, they could hit their head, they could bang their knees, or they could hurt you. So it's just important to always have that extra guide. And if they're using a Hoyer, then you're probably going to need help even getting the lift under them. So it's important to always have someone with you. Make sure that this is locked at the beginning of the transfer. So put it off to the side, just pop the locks on until you're ready to actually use it. So that way it's not rolling around or becoming a tripping hazard. So same with like those footrests and armrests, just get it out of your way. You don't want to accidentally be helping someone and trip. Then next for positioning the patient in a sling. So here's an example of a sling. So how you want this is so that the patient can sit on the inside. So the tag's going to go on the inside. This part is where their bottom is going to sit, and then this part is going to go up around their head to help support their neck as they're moving. Each one I've seen has different colored rings, but for the top, try to do the second ring, but it also depends on the person. So if they're a little bit bigger, just kind of go on your judgment. As long as it's on one of these colored rings and not like this black piece, then you should be safe. And the caregivers who work with them mostly can tell you the exact rings that they use for that patient. So it's just kind of dependent. And then the same with the bottom ones. So just being cautious of which ones you use, just to make sure that they're safe. I have seen two different kinds of slings, but this kind, you do not have to cross over their legs, because there's some that you can kind of tell, it kind of looks like pant legs on either side. Those ones, you cross over, and you kind of tuck these cords in. This one, you can just hook it, so they just lay in there. So you don't have to worry about that added step.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Bathing, it's really good to shower with a poetry. It's too hard. I don't know how to take out and then
To take this
for
from.
bed and then shower,
Right.
I wish if you show us how to take off in shower.
Yeah, so are they, so I guess my question is, are they sitting on like a chair? Okay, so what you can do, I get what you're saying, because it is hard when they're sitting like this. So this one, it helps to have two people, so you can pull on their bigger areas of their skin to roll underneath, as long as you're not pulling. The biggest thing is you're not pulling on like the arms or the legs, so you can kind of tuck and roll underneath, come in between their legs and roll under, kind of like if they're in bed. It's going to take a little bit extra, and you could even recruit a third person. So one person can kind of help at the trunk, one person can help at the meaty parts of the thigh, and kind of lift them a little to roll it under. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I could always pull up a video or something and send it so that they could show, so it'd be easier to see.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, because it's hard when I'm sitting on a plastic chair and I'm able-bodied and I can move around. But that's a really good question. I'm going to write that down so I can show you. The nice thing too is that these are mesh, so you can clean them. So if they get wet, it's not going to hurt it. You would just put it through the wash again. So worst case scenario, I mean, you can just keep it on. But you have to clean them behind anyways, so when you're doing that, you can always shift around. But I'll hold the video. Okay, and then for the lips, so we start with this one. So if they're in the bed, you're coming over and they already have this sling on. When you put it over the bed, make sure you're locking it again, so that when you're working with this, you're not making this move around. And always lock both sides. For this demonstration, I'm just doing one. Okay, so you'll strap this on. So this will be behind their head. You'll strap this on. These are pretty easy to count. And if you want to come and try after I'm done, come up and test yourself. This is also helpful when another person comes in, because when you're doing this, sometimes this comes kind of close to their head, so you can kind of guard it with your hand while the other person is strapping. And then the same with the bottom. Like this. Okay, and then once they're strapped in, then you unlock the brakes, and then you can use the controls to help drive them. So there's up and the down, so you lift them up.
Just lay down and relax.
You should always go as high as whatever the surface is that they're laying on, so that when they swing around, they're not hitting anything. Okay. High.
You look tired and
And then
nice to take a little nap.
in the perfect world, the wheelchair or whatever you're transferring to will already be cleared off and ready to go. That should be locked. You'll unlock this, you'll spring it around, and then you'll lower them on the chair. Again, as they're in the air, make sure that the person who's driving the Hoyer, just worry about the Hoyer, but the person who's not, obviously be cognizant so you're not in the way, but try and block their knees, because sometimes their knees are just kind of swinging, and so you want to guide them. And you can even guide them by just slightly pushing to position them to make it a little bit easier. Okay?
If you guys want more.
And then the only difference between the electric and the manual is just you have to crank it versus being able to use the remote. So cranking, the body mechanics, brakes should always be on. And then you can just move it with these vehicles. Any questions?
Good night.
Good. That's all I have for you in regards to this, if you have no questions. I'm going to follow up with the bathing question because that's really good. Okay? Thank you so much.